Hi everyone, so yesterday already the first Paragon 300 has been achieved, at least to my knowledge. This is this video here. Those guys actually came to my stream and it showed it to me, and they had also posted it on Reddit. So here those two guys, not the guy recording this here actually, but those two in the party actually both reached 300 together after this tier 69 run. Nice. So that only took them like 5 days or close to 6 days, something like that. And that's actually much faster than I had anticipated we would be on the way to a 300. After seeing the XP on the PTR, it was quite the grind to get there. And also in the early access when we played, there was an XP bug that we had that allowed us to really boost the Paragon really fast. But even so, it was quite long to get to 300. But there are some strategies around it. So if you're looking for some ways to get to high Paragon really fast, maybe not all the way to 300, then I got you covered because I've been testing this stuff a little bit lately. The TLDR of it is that you want to go fast at all times. I guess that comes as no surprise. Of course, no downtime, and going higher difficulty and faster clears obviously helps with more XP. And I recently made my how to farm everything video to talk about also, for example, where to get all the materials, where to get items, and where to get experience. And I mentioned Infernal Hordes and Pits are the two best options. Well, I looked into this a bit more deeply, and it turns out Pit is certainly better than Infernal Hordes, and this is for various factors. Number one, you can't really increase your clear speed in the Infernal Hordes. You can have like a very high AoE damage build, but you can't really benefit from going very fast, and also has a capped difficulty, with Torment 4 difficulty being, well, at least not very high for the good builds out there. So in that case, it's actually not really so beneficial to do Infernal Hordes just because of that limitation alone, and it kind of shows. Whereas in the pit, you can always go higher. So if your build is really overpowered, as something like what you can see here, the Crushing Hand Spirit Bone that I made a video about recently, and I have a Maxwell guide on if you want to check that out. This is just extremely fast and extremely efficient XP grinding. On top of this, in the pit itself, there is also a huge chunk of experience that comes from killing the boss. You can see this here right now. If you look at the XP bar, it will jump significantly once you kill the boss, probably like a few percent here or something. Yeah, you saw this. So I got something like, I don't know, 2 or 3% of the level just from killing this boss here at level 264. At this point, I need something like 250 million XP or something like that. So in my case, this is actually something like 25 pit runs to get a level up. So that's kind of like what it's looking like at this stage. But in the earlier levels, this is way, way faster. For example, when I was boosting people through the pit, I managed to get level 1 to 60 in like 15 minutes, or even faster than that, in like 5 pit runs. If you have a really fast build, you can probably do it in 10 minutes or so, boosting someone all the way from 1 to 60. Because the XP doesn't actually scale differently depending on the character level, it seems. You get like, you know, X amount of XP on X pit tier level. And this helps you with actually grinding a lot of XP. And another thing is also that this experience reward at the end of the run is not actually buffed by experience bonuses like elixirs, the opals, and the new XP wells. So this is like a flat reward that they get at the end. I tested this, for example, for an XP well, and even though the XP well that you get in Nightmare Dungeons says that you get 15% extra XP, it was actually more in the range of like 4 to 5% bonus XP. And that's because roughly 2/3 of the total XP in the pit run comes from the boss kill and the completion bonus. So the boss itself doesn't actually give anything. There's like some extra boost that you get, and that is not actually buffed by XP bonuses. So in that case, XP wells are actually not required in order to farm experience efficiently when you go into the pit, which is the best way to farm XP. So if you were thinking you're gonna log in, you're gonna blast some Nightmare Dungeons until you get a pool, and then you start blasting the pit, well, yeah, it's not really worth it, really. You can maybe consider this if you actually have 3 other friends, and then everyone goes their own ways into separate Nightmare Dungeons, tries to find a pool, invites everyone else. And if you can do that in like 5 minutes at the start of a blasting session, then maybe this could be kind of okay. But this is kind of the extent of the efficiency you need in order to make those experience wells actually perform. So they're kind of undertuned, I guess, when it comes to how good they are supposed to be, or rather they are not necessary in order to do the most efficient XP grind strategy, which is just go pit. And the same goes for the season theme. You have to actually spend probably at least 5 minutes, maybe more, in order to do a realm walker, and then you get 1.5 hours of opals that also give you 15% bonus. So it's slightly better than a pool, because the pool only lasts 1 hour and it kind of stacks with them, but it's not really worth doing the realm walkers just for the XP bonus, it turns out. It's best to just go pit after pit after pit and get the most experience per hour, because you don't have any distractions. And now let's talk about how do you actually do the pit and which levels do you want to farm. Well, I collected some data on this here, so you can see this here. I've done like some, runs on like every 5 tiers. So we're looking at the 2 left columns mostly here, the tier and the XP in millions per run. So I've done like 3 runs on 60, 3 on 65, and so on, just to collect a little data. And you see here, it kind of scales up very slowly, as you can see. So starting at tier 60, for example, I got pretty consistent 8.5 million XP per run. And on tier 100, I got something like 40% or so extra if you look at this here. So I got like 11.6, 11.2, 12.1. There is a bit of variance here depending on the monster types and how many elites they kill, how many normal monsters, and so on. Sometimes, the pit progression is a bit different. In some cases, it's very consistent. Sometimes it's like, a bit of an average around, for example, 11.5 here or something like that, or 11.7 maybe. And you see here that it kind of constantly rises. I also had some other people reach out to me while I was doing these tests on stream, and they also told me they've tested this. And it appears that there is some kind of XP scaling going on per pit tier that is roughly in the range of plus 1% extra XP. Now, I can't really say if this is a multiplicative bonus per tier, so it's like 1% and then times 1% bonus times 1% bonus and so on. It may actually just be that this is, some bonus that stacks up plus 1% additively over the tiers. But either way, you see the difference is just not very large. And in fact, the best strategy to farm the pits is actually just make the speediest, fastest blasting build you could ever imagine on your setup, basically. Throw in a chakra if you must for the cooldown, and then use your dashes, your shadow steps, your swords or whatever, anything to go faster basically. Throw in an inexorable Reaper aspect on your Necro on the Emerald if you have to, and just go as fast as you can. So that's basically the gist of it here, because the XP per tier barely ramps up, but the monster HP of course ramps significantly. Now I'm not really sure exactly how fast it scales, but I think it's something like roughly times 10 per 10 or 15 pit tiers or so. So the difference between like a tier 60 and a tier 90 is probably like in the range of times 100 or so in your damage output. But the XP is only like, 30% stronger or something, less than that even. So it's just not really ramping up very much. And this means that if you can speed up your runs in any way, then you should do that basically. And likewise, as you go higher and higher tiers, if you're just after farming experience, you should always stop at that point where your run becomes any little bit slower basically. So if the boss doesn't like instantly explode anymore, then this is basically the point where you do not want to go further up, because even like 5 seconds extra on your run is just not really worth the trouble. Now there are some other considerations here as well. You might be leveling your glyphs. You also get, for example, slightly better loot on the higher pit tiers, so there's like more ancestral loot dropping. I think you get more obols as well. So there is a slight advantage to going a bit higher. But again, if you can choose, for example, between, let's say, a 3-minute tier 80 run and a 2-minute tier 70 run, then the tier 70 2-minute definitely wins. So there's just like, it's just a minor difference in like how much XP you get, like something like 1 million more in like a roughly 10 million XP run. Yeah, that is kind of nice, but you can go like, a third faster or something like that. Now you also have to consider the loading screens, for example. Sometimes they might be very long for, some hardware that you might have. But in general, I guess you have something like 30 seconds downtime between runs if you just kind of like chain back to back all the time, and then maybe every 5 runs you go salvage real quick, and then every 10 runs you go gamble real quick. So it kind of adds up to something like 30 seconds downtime per run, I guess, and then you have the run time. So this is like part of the calculation here. But yeah, TLDR, go fast and don't go very high if you cannot go higher with the setup that you have. Just try to get all the speed you can, temper your movement speed and whatever, and this is it. Now lastly, I can give you some other pointers here about some other tests I've been running. For example, I've compared pits also to nightmare dungeons, I did not really do like full clears on these nightmare dungeons. I just collected a bit of data here on some of those dungeons, and you see here I get extremely little XP. So each of those dungeons is probably somewhere in the range of like, you know, a good versus a bad pit run in terms of the duration. Sometimes nightmare dungeons are even longer than the pit runs. Sometimes they're much shorter. So for example, I remember this run was just like 30 seconds. I was out again, so that was kind of good actually. But yeah, kind of one of the better ones, let's say. And you see here, I get something like 2-3 million or so in one full nightmare dungeon. It's like running to the boss on the shortest path I could find. So if you do full clears, of course, you will get more out of the dungeon, but you will also spend a lot more time, and especially a lot of time backtracking, which doesn't happen in the pit. But either way, you can see that the rewards in XP at least are very low. And this is also what I mentioned about the XP pools at the start. You can go nightmare dungeons, and you can actually get some XP while trying to find an XP pool, but it seems so inefficient that you just blast pits all day long because you get so little XP in a dungeon. It's like, you know, a fifth or something because it's missing this bonus reward at the end. For example, the monsters are lower level in Torment 4, for example. They are like basically at this difficulty here. And if you can go higher, you can get a lot more XP out of the pit anyway. And the same is kind of true for the hordes. So the hordes are kind of decent. So for example, I did a 10 wave horde here. That was like 25 million XP. I tried this time again with a pool. That was like 30 million XP. So something like 2.5 to 3 million per wave. It kind of ramps up a little bit. So maybe from 2 to 3.5 million or so per wave, because you get, you know, more elite spawns later on. You get like hellborns and whatever that, you know, stuff that you click in the infernal hordes. So there's a kind of a progression in the longer horde runs compared to, for example, 6 wave horde clears. But either way, you spend something like, let's say, 12 minutes on a 10 wave horde if you're fast and killing the boss and then looting and so on. And this would mean something like 150 million XP per hour if you just chain 5 times 10 hordes in a row or something, or maybe even less because this was with a pool. So in this case, something like 125 million XP per hour. And if you look at, for example, let's say 90-second pit clears with a 30 seconds downtime, this would equal up to like 30 pit runs per hour. And if you do something like a pit 75 in that time, well, that's 300 million XP. That's like more than twice what you can get in the hordes. Now I do see that, you know, I'm playing on a Spiritborn. Spiritborn is pretty OP right now. It's very fast class as well compared to, let's say, Necros or so. But every class can kind of try to go at least somewhat decently fast. And there is certainly, you know, such a large gap between pit and the rest that even for the Necros, it's going to be probably better to go into the pit and just like try to make a speedy setup, as I mentioned, throw everything they can in there. And you could probably also do like, you know, 2.5 minute runs, 3 minute runs, or something like that pretty reliably. So if I had to write down my findings here, like TLDR, I would say go fast, don't go high, pit rules everything, forget about XP pools and opals. So this is kind of what I have to share here for this video. If you want to grind out your paragons, then go by those 3 rules and you're gonna be the most successful. And that's also it for this video here. So just wanted to share this. This is the testing I've done. Let me know what you think, if you have like any other like cool XP farming strats or something. But outside of this, I cannot really imagine that thing can beat the pit at least. So maybe there's some other stuff that you can do that is kind of fancy. If you want to grind to 300 or close to it, then I really recommend doing the pit as much as possible. You have to do it a bunch anyway for your glyphs, especially if you want to switch builds a little bit, then maybe you have to re-level some glyphs. And there's kind of a real incentive to do that anyway. So in that case, you just try to make the most out of it. Go fast, don't go high. And pit in general is also just like a really smooth farming content. You can get obels, you just have kind of streamlined progression. So personally, I kind of like running the pit. That's it for now. Hope you enjoyed this and good luck at Season 6. See you guys next time.